The morning sun reflected off the glass facade of the Meridian Solutions building as Andre Washington pulled his car into the visitor parking space. He checked his watch, 8:45 a.m., 15 minutes early for his 9 o'clock meeting. Perfect. Andre always made it a point to arrive early, a habit he had developed during his 20-year journey from software developer to CEO of Phoenix Technologies. Today was supposed to be a big day. After months of negotiations, Andre was here to finalize the acquisition of Meridian Solutions, a mid-sized software company that would help Phoenix Technologies expand into new markets. The deal was worth nearly $30 million, and both companies stood to benefit greatly. Andre straightened his tie and glanced at himself in the rearview mirror. At 45, his close-cropped hair showed hints of gray at the temples, giving him what his wife called a distinguished look. He grabbed his leather portfolio case from the passenger seat and stepped out of his car. The early summer air felt pleasant as Andre walked toward the entrance, mentally reviewing the key points he wanted to discuss in the meeting. This acquisition had been in the works for nearly 6 months. His team had conducted thorough due diligence, and the numbers looked promising. Meridian had some innovative products but lacked the infrastructure and capital to scale. Phoenix Technologies had both, making this a perfect match on paper. As he pushed through the revolving door into the lobby, Andre felt confident. He had built his company from nothing, working late nights coding in his apartment after his day job, eventually hiring his first employee, then his 10th, then his 100th. Now Phoenix Technologies employed over 500 people and was valued at more than $200 million. It hadn't been an easy journey, especially as a black man in an industry not known for its diversity. But Andre had persevered through the challenges. The lobby of Meridian Solutions was sleek and modern, with minimalist furniture and abstract art hanging on the walls. A young woman with blonde hair sat behind the reception desk, typing away at her computer. Andre approached with a smile. "Good morning," he said pleasantly. "I'm here for a 9 a.m. meeting with Richard Parker and the executive team." The receptionist glanced up briefly, her eyes flicking over Andre's charcoal gray suit and blue tie before returning to her screen. "And you are?" she asked, her tone slightly dismissive. "Andre Washington, CEO of Phoenix Technologies," he replied, maintaining his professional demeanor despite noting her tone. The receptionist frowned slightly as if confused. She looked at Andre again, this time more carefully, her eyes lingering on his face. "Are you sure you have the right building? I don't see any delivery scheduled for this morning." Andre blinked, taken aback by her assumption. "I'm not making a delivery," he clarified calmly. "I'm here for an executive meeting regarding the acquisition. Richard Parker and I spoke yesterday to confirm." The receptionist's expression shifted to one of skepticism. "An acquisition meeting?" She clicked through something on her computer. "I don't see anything like that on the calendar, and Mr. Parker is very busy this morning." Andre took a deep breath, maintaining his composure. This wasn't the first time he'd been misjudged based on his appearance, but it was still jarring every time it happened. "Perhaps you could call Richard's office. He's expecting me." "Mr. Parker doesn't like to be disturbed," she replied, her tone growing more dismissive. She looked Andre up and down once more. "Perhaps you're thinking of a different company. Or a different day?" Andre reached into his pocket and pulled out his business card, sliding it across the desk to her. "I assure you I'm in the right place at the right time. I'm Andre Washington, CEO of Phoenix Technologies. We're in the final stages of acquiring Meridian Solutions." The receptionist barely glanced at the card. "Sir, there must be some mistake. If you were really here for such an important meeting, I would have been notified." Her voice had taken on a condescending edge that made Andre's jaw tighten slightly. "Could you please check again?" he asked, his voice level despite his growing frustration. "The meeting has been on the books for weeks." The receptionist sighed as if inconvenienced. "Look, all deliveries need to wait outside. Company policy. If you want to leave whatever it is with me, I can make sure someone gets it." Andre felt a familiar weight settle in his chest, a mix of disappointment and resignation. 20 years of building a successful tech company, featured in Business Insider and Forbes, and still being mistaken for a delivery person. He looked around the lobby, noting how several employees walked past, glancing curiously in his direction but saying nothing. "I'm not here to make a delivery," Andre repeated, his patience wearing thin but his voice remaining steady. I'm here as the CEO of Phoenix Technologies for a meeting with your executive team about the acquisition of your company. The receptionist's expression hardened. Sir, if you don't have an appointment, I'm going to have to ask you to wait outside. She gestured toward the door. If you want, I can take your name and number and have someone call you to schedule a proper appointment. Andre stood there for a moment, contemplating his next move. He could feel the eyes of other employees on him, watching the interaction unfold. In his 20 years of business, he had learned when to push back and when to change tactics. This was a moment for the latter. Without another word to the receptionist, he took his business card back, pulled out his phone, and dialed a number. The phone rang twice before someone picked up. Richard Parker speaking, came the voice on the other end. Richard? It's Andre Washington, he said, making sure his voice was clear enough for the receptionist to hear. I'm in your lobby for our 9 a.m. meeting. But it seems there's been some confusion at the front desk. There was a pause. And then Richard's voice came through, sounding confused and slightly alarmed. What, you're already here? I'm so sorry about that, Andre. I'll be right down. Andre ended the call and slipped his phone back into his pocket. The receptionist was now watching him with a mixture of confusion and growing unease. Less than a minute later, the elevator doors opened, and a tall man with salt and pepper hair hurried across the lobby. Richard Parker, CEO of Meridian Solutions, looked flustered as he approached. Andre, I'm so sorry about this, Richard said, extending his hand. I don't know what happened with our communication system. Andre shook his hand firmly. No problem, Richard. These things happen. His voice was calm, but his eyes conveyed a different message. Richard turned to the receptionist, whose face had drained of color as she realized her mistake. Lisa, this is Andre Washington, CEO of Phoenix Technologies. He's here for our executive meeting about the acquisition. His tone made it clear that this was not a small matter. I didn't know, she stammered, her earlier confidence completely evaporated. He didn't. I wasn't told. We'll discuss this later. Richard cut her off, turning back to Andre with an apologetic smile. The team is waiting upstairs. Shall we? As they walked toward the elevator, Richard continued to apologize. I really can't express how sorry I am about that, Andre. That's absolutely not how we do business here. Andre nodded, his mind already turning over the implications of what had just happened. What did this interaction reveal about Meridian's company culture? About their hiring practices? About how they might treat his employees after an acquisition? Inside the elevator, Richard pressed the button for the top floor, still talking rapidly about how excited everyone was about the potential deal. Andre listened politely, but his thoughts were elsewhere. The doors opened onto a floor with an open concept design, glass-walled conference rooms visible from the elevator. A group of executives was visible through one of those glass walls, arranged around a large table with presentation materials ready. As they walked toward the conference room, Andre made a mental note to pay special attention to the company culture discussions that would be part of today's agenda. What had seemed like a perfect match on paper now required a closer look. He put on his professional smile as they entered the room and introductions began, but in the back of his mind, a decision was already forming, one that would change the course of both companies in ways no one in that room could yet imagine. The conference room buzzed with anticipation as Andre took his seat at the table. 6 executives from Meridian Solutions sat opposite him, their faces a mixture of eagerness and curiosity. Richard Parker, still flustered from the lobby incident, made quick introductions. Everyone, this is Andre Washington, CEO of Phoenix Technologies, Richard said, gesturing toward Andre. And Andre, this is our leadership team. Andre shook hands with each person as they introduced themselves, the CFO, the CTO, the COO, and 3 vice presidents of various departments. They all smiled warmly, completely unaware of what had just happened downstairs. Before we begin, Richard said, can I get you anything? Coffee, water? Water would be fine, thank you, Andre replied, his voice pleasant but reserved. As Richard poured him a glass, Andre studied the faces around the table. They seemed genuinely excited about the acquisition, unaware that the incident in the lobby had shifted something fundamental in his thinking. The CFO, a woman with short gray hair named Patricia, opened a folder in front of her. We've prepared all the financial documentation you requested, Mr. Washington. Our numbers for the last quarter were even stronger than projected. Andre nodded. opening his own portfolio. That's good to hear. But before we dive into the financials, I'd like to discuss something else first. The executives exchanged glances, clearly not expecting a deviation from the agenda. Of course, Richard said, settling into his chair. What would you like to discuss? Andre took a sip of water, gathering his thoughts. The room was silent, all eyes on him. I'm curious about your company culture, he said finally. Tell me about how Meridian approaches diversity and inclusion. The question seemed to catch everyone off guard. Richard cleared his throat. Well, we pride ourselves on creating a welcoming environment for all employees. We have a strict non-discrimination policy. Andre nodded, his expression neutral. And how is that policy implemented in practice? What specific programs do you have in place? The VP of Human Resources, a thin man named Douglas, jumped in. We comply with all equal opportunity employment laws, of course. And we've been discussing implementing some diversity initiatives in the coming year. Discussing, Andre repeated. But nothing concrete yet? Douglas shifted uncomfortably. Well, no, not formally. But we're open to it. Andre made a note in his portfolio. The room had grown noticeably tenser. May I ask why you're focusing on this? Richard asked, trying to sound casual. I thought today was primarily about finalizing the financial aspects of the acquisition. Andre looked up, his eyes meeting Richard's. An acquisition isn't just about numbers. It's about merging two company cultures, two sets of values. I need to ensure there's compatibility. Richard nodded quickly. Of course. And I assure you, our values align perfectly with Phoenix Technologies. We've admired your company's approach to business for years. Andre leaned back slightly in his chair. Something happened in your lobby just now that makes me question that alignment. The room fell silent. Richard's face flushed. When I arrived, Andre continued, his voice calm and measured, your receptionist assumed I was a delivery person. When I explained who I was, she insisted I wait outside. The executive's expressions ranged from shock to embarrassment. The CFO, Patricia, covered her mouth with her hand. I had no idea, Richard stammered. Lisa is new, she probably didn't recognize you. I assure you this isn't reflective of our company values. Andre nodded slightly. Perhaps, but it raises questions about the environment here. If your front desk staff makes assumptions based on appearance, what other biases might exist within your organization? The VP of Marketing, a woman named Karen, leaned forward. Mr. Washington, please understand this was an isolated incident. We would never condone that kind of behavior. And yet it happened, Andre replied. And from what I understand, you don't have any formal diversity training or programs in place that might prevent such incidents. No one had an immediate response to that. The silence in the room was heavy. Finally, Richard spoke. Andre, I cannot apologize enough for what happened. It was completely unacceptable. But please don't judge our entire company based on one employee's mistake. Andre considered this. I understand your point, Richard. But company culture starts at the front door. It's reflected in every interaction, at every level. He turned a page in his portfolio, seemingly shifting gears. Let's look at your employee demographics. What percentage of your technical staff are people of color? Douglas, the HR VP, looked uncomfortable. I don't have those exact numbers on hand. Approximately? Andre pressed. Maybe 5%? Douglas guessed, looking to Richard for help. And in leadership positions? Richard cleared his throat. Well, as you can see, he gestured around the table where everyone except Patricia was white. Andre nodded, making another note. The mood in the room had completely transformed from the eager anticipation of closing a deal to something much more somber. Let's move on to the financials for now, Andre said, giving them a momentary reprieve. Patricia, you mentioned the latest quarterly results? The relief in the room was palpable as Patricia launched into her presentation, walking through Meridian's financial performance with charts and projections. For the next hour, they discussed balance sheets, market potential, and integration strategies. Andre asked thoughtful questions, taking detailed notes. To anyone observing, it would have appeared to be a normal acquisition meeting. But underneath the surface, Andre's mind was working on a different level. He was weighing not just the financial value of Meridian Solutions, but also the potential impact on Phoenix Technologies' culture, a culture he had carefully built over 2 decades. As Patricia concluded her presentation, Andre thanked her and then turned to the CTO, a bearded man named Trevor. Tell me about your team structure. How do you handle collaboration and feedback? Trevor brightened. clearly more comfortable discussing technical matters. We have a flat structure in the development department. Everyone's encouraged to share ideas. And how diverse are those perspectives? Andre asked. Do you find your team brings different viewpoints to problem solving? Trevor hesitated. Well, we hire the best talent we can find. Our focus is on technical skills. Andre nodded. At Phoenix, we've found that diverse teams consistently outperform homogeneous ones in innovation metrics. Different backgrounds bring different approaches to problem solving. Several people around the table nodded in agreement, though Andre noticed it seemed more like a reflexive gesture than genuine understanding. As the meeting continued, Andre maintained his professional demeanor, but his questions repeatedly circled back to company culture, employee satisfaction, and inclusion practices. The executives grew increasingly uncomfortable, sensing that the acquisition they had been counting on was somehow in jeopardy. By the time they reached the end of the agenda, nearly 3 hours had passed. Richard looked at Andre hopefully. So what do you think? Are we ready to move forward? Andre closed his portfolio deliberately. You have an impressive operation here, Richard. Your financial performance is strong, and your technical innovations have real potential. The executives' faces showed cautious optimism. However, Andre continued, I have some concerns that I need to consider carefully before finalizing anything. I'd like to take a day or two to reflect on our discussion. Richard's smile faltered. Of course. But may I ask what concerns specifically? Is there anything we can address immediately? Andre stood up, gathering his things. It's not about quick fixes, Richard. It's about fundamental values and how they're expressed in day-to-day operations. I need to consider whether our companies are truly compatible at that level. The executives exchanged worried glances as they all stood. Richard walked Andre to the elevator, making one last attempt to salvage the situation. Andre, I want you to know that I'll be addressing what happened in the lobby immediately. That kind of behavior is absolutely unacceptable. Andre nodded. I appreciate that, Richard. But as I said, it's not about one incident or one employee. It's about the environment that allows such incidents to occur. As the elevator doors opened, Andre stepped inside and turned to face Richard. I'll be in touch in a couple of days. The doors closed on Richard's anxious expression. Alone in the elevator, Andre finally allowed himself a deep sigh. The weight of the morning's events settled on his shoulders. 20 years of building his company, of proving himself over and over, and still being judged by the color of his skin rather than the content of his character. As the elevator descended, Andre made a phone call. Hey, Miguel, he said when his COO answered. Cancel my afternoon meetings. We need to talk about Meridian Solutions. Things just got complicated. The elevator reached the lobby and the doors opened. The receptionist, Lisa, looked up as Andre walked past her desk toward the exit. Her face showed a mixture of embarrassment and fear, but Andre didn't stop to speak with her. Some lessons couldn't be taught through words alone. As he stepped outside into the sunshine, Andre already knew what his decision would be. The question now was how to implement it in a way that would send the right message, not just to Meridian Solutions, but to the entire industry. The Phoenix Technologies headquarters stood in stark contrast to Meridian Solutions building. Instead of cold glass and steel, warm wood accents and abundant natural light created a welcoming atmosphere. As Andre walked through the open workspace, employees greeted him with genuine smiles and casual waves. This was the culture he had intentionally built over 2 decades, one where everyone felt valued, regardless of their position or background. Andre nodded to his assistant, Thomas, who was waiting outside his office door. How did it go? Thomas asked, falling into step beside him. Complicated, Andre replied, setting his portfolio on his desk. Call Miguel, Patricia, and Diane. I need them here as soon as possible. Thomas raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions. They're all in the building. I'll get them right away. Andre took off his suit jacket and hung it on the back of his chair. He loosened his tie slightly as he stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The skyline that had once seemed so impossible to reach was now at eye level. 20 minutes later, 3 people filed into his office. Miguel Hernandez, his chief operating officer, Patricia Chen, his chief financial officer, and Diane Williams, his chief legal officer. They were more than his executive team. They were the people who had been with him through the hardest years of building Phoenix Technologies. Close the door, Andre said, gesturing for them to sit. We need to talk about Meridian. Miguel leaned forward, concern evident on his face. What happened? I thought today was just a formality. Andre took a deep breath and recounted the morning's events, from the receptionist's assumption to the revealing conversations with Meridian's leadership team. His colleagues listened without interruption, their expressions darkening as the story unfolded. When he finished, Patricia was the first to speak. So their company has no diversity initiatives, a homogeneous leadership team, and their own CEO admits they've only been discussing the possibility of inclusion programs? Andre nodded. And that's not even addressing what happened in the lobby. Diane, ever the pragmatic legal mind, tapped her pen against her notepad. From a purely business perspective, the acquisition still makes financial sense. Their technology would save us at least a year of development time. But at what cost? Miguel countered. We're not just buying their technology, we're inheriting their culture. Their employees would become our employees. Exactly, Andre said. And that's my concern. We've worked too hard to build what we have here. The question is, would acquiring Meridian strengthen Phoenix or undermine it? The room fell silent as they all considered the implications. What are you thinking? Patricia asked finally, her eyes fixed on Andre. Andre walked back to his desk and sat down. I'm thinking we walk away. His words hung in the air. Walking away from the Meridian acquisition meant walking away from months of work and potentially millions in future revenue. Are you sure? Diane asked, always careful to consider all angles. We could still negotiate terms that would allow us to reshape their culture post-acquisition. Andre shook his head. It would be an uphill battle. Culture isn't something you can change overnight with a new policy or a training session. It's ingrained in how they operate, who they hire, who they promote, and based on what I saw today, they don't even recognize there's a problem. Miguel nodded slowly. I agree. If they don't see the value in creating an inclusive environment, trying to force it would just create resistance. Patricia opened her laptop. Let me run some numbers. If we walk away from Meridian, what are our alternatives for expanding into that market space? For the next hour, they discussed options, ran financial projections, and considered the potential fallout of their decision. The more they talked, the clearer it became that walking away from Meridian was the right choice. Not just ethically, but strategically. There's something else we should consider, Andre said, after they had reached a consensus on the acquisition. Our service contracts with Meridian. The others looked up, surprised. We're their primary cloud services provider, Andre continued. That contract is worth over $2 million annually to us. Diane frowned. Are you suggesting we terminate those contracts too? That would be a significant revenue hit, and there might be legal implications depending on the contract terms. Andre nodded. I understand the financial impact, but I'm asking whether we want to continue doing business with a company whose values are so clearly at odds with our own. The room fell silent again, as they all processed the weight of what Andre was suggesting. Miguel was the first to speak. I support whatever decision you make, Andre. But if we're going to do this, we should be prepared for the questions that will follow. This isn't just walking away from an acquisition. This is cutting ties with a major client. It would send a message, Patricia acknowledged. Not just to Meridian, but to the entire industry. That's exactly my point, Andre said. Maybe it's time we made our values clear, not just in our mission statement, but in how we conduct business. Diane flipped through her notes. The service contracts have a 30-day termination clause. We would need to provide written notice, but legally, we're within our rights to end the relationship. Andre looked at each of his executives in turn. I'm not making this decision lightly, and I want your honest opinions. Are we prepared to walk away from $2 million in annual revenue to stand by our principles? Patricia looked down at her financial projections. It would impact our third quarter results, but we're solid enough to absorb the hit. From a purely financial standpoint, we can afford to do this. It's not just about whether we can afford it, Miguel added. It's about whether we can afford not to. What message does it send to our own employees if we continue to do business with a company that treated our CEO this way? Andre nodded, appreciating their perspectives. Diane, any legal concerns beyond the termination clause? She shook her head. None that I can see. As long as we follow the proper notification procedures, we're on solid ground. Andre leaned back in his chair. His decision made. Then it's settled. We'll notify Meridian that we're not moving forward with the acquisition, and we'll begin the process of terminating our service contracts with them. How do you want to handle the communication? Miguel asked. I'll call Richard personally about the acquisition, Andre replied. He deserves to hear it directly from me. As for the service contracts, let's prepare a formal letter. I want it to be clear that this isn't an emotional reaction but a business decision based on compatibility of values. Diane made a note. I'll draft something this afternoon. What about public messaging? Patricia asked. This will raise questions in the industry. Andre thought for a moment. Let's keep it simple and factual. If asked, we say that after careful consideration, we determined that Phoenix Technologies and Meridian Solutions have different visions for the future. No need to publicly shame them. The meeting concluded with action items for each executive. As they filed out of his office, Miguel hung back. You okay? He asked once they were alone. Andre sighed. Honestly, I'm tired. Tired of having to prove myself over and over again. Tired of being judged by my appearance rather than my accomplishments. Miguel nodded in understanding. For what it's worth, I think you're making the right call. Not just for the company, but for yourself. Thanks, Andre said. It's not an easy decision, but it's the right one. After Miguel left, Andre turned back to the window, looking out at the city skyline. The incident at Meridian had stirred up familiar feelings. The frustration of being underestimated. The exhaustion of constantly having to assert his position. But there was something else too. A sense of clarity and purpose. He picked up his phone and dialed Richard Parker's number. The Meridian CEO answered on the second ring, his voice hopeful. Andre, I was just about to call you. We've been discussing some diversity initiatives we could implement right away. Richard, Andre said, his voice calm but firm. I've made my decision about the acquisition. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I see, Richard said, his tone guarded. And what have you decided? Phoenix Technologies will not be moving forward with the acquisition of Meridian Solutions. The silence that followed was heavy. When Richard spoke again, his voice had an edge of desperation. Andre, please reconsider. What happened in the lobby was unfortunate, but it was one isolated incident. We can address it. It's not about one incident, Richard. It's about fundamental differences in how we approach business and people. Our companies simply aren't compatible. Is there anything we can do to change your mind? Andre thought about the question. It's not about changing my mind. It's about changing your company culture, and that's something that has to come from within. It can't be forced or rushed just to close a deal. After ending the call with Richard, Andre stared at his phone for a long moment. Then he sent a message to his executive team. Decision communicated to Meridian. Diane, please proceed with the service contract termination letter. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across his office, Andre felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now he had stood firm in his principles, and that was worth more than any acquisition. News traveled fast in the tech industry. By the following morning, rumors were already circulating about the failed acquisition. Andre arrived at his office to find several messages from industry contacts, all fishing for details. His phone buzzed with a text from Miguel. Check your email. You need to see this. Andre opened his laptop and found an email from Miguel with the subject line Meridian stock. Attached was a screenshot of Meridian. Solutions stock price down nearly 8% since the market opened. Before Andre could respond, his phone rang. It was David Chen, a tech reporter from Industry Insider who had covered Phoenix Technologies' rise over the years. Andre, I'm hearing that Phoenix pulled out of the Meridian acquisition. Care to comment? Andre chose his words carefully. David, it's true that after careful consideration, we decided not to move forward with acquiring Meridian Solutions. Both companies have different visions for the future. Different visions? David pressed. Sources tell me there was an incident during your visit yesterday. Something about their receptionist not recognizing you and asking you to wait outside. Andre paused, surprised that the story had leaked so quickly. I prefer not to discuss the details of private business meetings, David. Fair enough, the reporter replied. But would you say that company culture played a role in your decision? Company culture is always a consideration in any acquisition, Andre said diplomatically. Phoenix Technologies has built its success on certain core values, including respect for every individual regardless of their position or background. We look for partners who share those values. After ending the call, Andre sent a message to his executive team. The news is out. Let's stick to our agreed messaging. This isn't about shaming Meridian, it's about standing by our principles. Throughout the day, Andre focused on business as usual, reviewing product development plans and meeting with his marketing team about an upcoming launch. But by late afternoon, his assistant Thomas knocked on his open door. "You might want to see this," Thomas said, placing a tablet on Andre's desk. On the screen was an article from Industry Insider with the headline, "Phoenix Technologies walks away from $30 million acquisition after CEO racially profiled." The article quoted anonymous sources claiming that Andre had been mistaken for a delivery person and asked to wait outside by a Meridian receptionist. Andre read through the piece, which included a statement from Meridian calling the incident a regrettable misunderstanding and claiming they were committed to fostering an inclusive workplace. The article also mentioned that Phoenix Technologies had given notice to terminate their service contracts with Meridian, representing a loss of over $2 million in annual revenue. Andre set down the tablet with a sigh. This was exactly what he had hoped to avoid. A public spectacle that turned a business decision into headline news. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Diane. "Richard Parker is trying to reach you. Says it's urgent." Andre considered letting the call go to voicemail but decided against it. Better to deal with this directly. "Richard," he answered, keeping his tone neutral. "Andre, we need to talk," Richard said, his voice tense. "This article in Industry Insider, it's causing panic among our investors. Our stock is in free fall." "I'm sorry to hear that, Richard, but I didn't speak to any reporters about the specifics of what happened in your lobby." "Then who did?" Richard demanded. "This story is killing us, and now I hear you're terminating our service contracts too? This feels like punishment, Andre." Andre took a deep breath. "It's not punishment, Richard. It's a business decision based on values alignment. And as for the leak, it could have come from anyone in your building who witnessed what happened." "Look," Richard's voice softened, taking on a pleading tone. "We can fix this. I've already fired the receptionist and we're implementing diversity training for all staff, effective immediately. We're even creating a VP of Diversity and Inclusion position. Just tell me what you need to reconsider the acquisition." Andre frowned. "You fired the receptionist?" "Of course. Her behavior was completely unacceptable. Richard, firing one employee doesn't solve the underlying issue, and frankly it concerns me that your first response was to terminate her, rather than use this as a teaching moment. What do you want from us, Andre? We're doing everything we can to make this right." "This isn't about what I want," Andre replied. "This is about building a company culture where respect is the default, not something you implement after a PR crisis. Our decision stands." After hanging up, Andre stared at his phone, troubled by Richard's approach. Firing the receptionist felt like scapegoating rather than addressing the real problem. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. It was Patricia, his CFO. "Got a minute?" she asked, stepping into his office. "Always," Andre replied, gesturing to a chair. Patricia sat down, her expression serious. "I've been monitoring the fallout from the Meridian situation. Their stock is down almost 12% now." Andre nodded. "Richard just called. He's in damage control mode. Fired the receptionist, implementing diversity training, creating a new executive position. Reactive, not proactive," Patricia observed. "Too little, too late." "Exactly," Andre agreed. "But that's not why you're here, is it?" Patricia smiled slightly. "No, I wanted to show you this." She handed him a printed report. "These are the messages our HR department has received since the news broke this morning." Andre scanned the document. There were dozens of emails from job seekers, many from underrepresented groups in tech, expressing interest in working for Phoenix Technologies. Many mentioned the Meridian story specifically, saying they were impressed by a company that would walk away from a lucrative deal based on principles. "This is unexpected," Andre said, still reading through the messages. "It gets better," Patricia continued. "I've had calls from 3 potential clients today, all wanting to discuss moving their business from competitors to us. One specifically mentioned that they were impressed by a company that puts its money where its mouth is on diversity and inclusion." Andre looked up, surprised. "They're coming to us because of the Meridian situation." Patricia nodded. "Apparently taking a stand has made us more attractive, not less. And there's more." She pulled up something on her tablet. Social media is buzzing about Phoenix Technologies. The hashtag #WaitOutside is trending, with people sharing their own experiences of being underestimated or discriminated against in professional settings. Andre took the tablet, scrolling through the posts. Many expressed support for Phoenix's decision, while others shared personal stories of similar experiences. One post from a young black software developer read, "Seeing a CEO like Andre Washington stand firm against this kind of treatment gives me hope that things can change in this industry. I never intended this to become a movement," Andre said, handing the tablet back. "Sometimes leadership means making tough calls without knowing the full impact," Patricia replied. "But I think it's safe to say that the financial hit from losing Meridian's business will be offset by new opportunities." Before Andre could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from Miguel. "Turn on Channel 7 News now." Andre grabbed the remote for the small TV mounted on his office wall and switched it on. A reporter was standing outside Meridian Solutions headquarters. Sources within the company confirmed that Richard Parker has called an emergency board meeting to discuss the crisis. Meridian stock has dropped nearly 15% today, following news that Phoenix Technologies walked away from a planned acquisition after an incident involving racial profiling. Several major clients are reportedly reviewing their relationships with Meridian in light of these events. Andre muted the TV, feeling conflicted. He hadn't wanted to damage Meridian's business. He had simply made the decision that was right for Phoenix Technologies. "This got bigger than we anticipated," Patricia said. Watching the silent news footage, Andre nodded slowly. Maybe it needed to. Maybe this conversation is long overdue in our industry. His phone rang again. Another reporter seeking comment. Andre declined the call. "I think we need to be thoughtful about our next steps," he said to Patricia. "This isn't about punishing Meridian or capitalizing on their crisis. It's about standing firm in our values while encouraging positive change." Patricia nodded. "What did you have in mind?" Andre thought for a moment. "Draft a company statement. Something that acknowledges the situation without gloating or shaming. Make it clear that Phoenix Technologies believes in second chances and growth. We won't be reconsidering the acquisition or service contracts, but we're open to seeing how Meridian evolves from this experience." "A diplomatic approach," Patricia observed. "Taking the high road." "Exactly," Andre replied. "And let's accelerate our own diversity initiatives. If this situation has taught us anything, it's that there's still a lot of work to be done in this industry." As Patricia left to draft the statement, Andre turned back to the window, looking out at the city skyline. What had begun as a routine acquisition meeting had turned into something much bigger, a moment that was forcing an entire industry to examine its culture and practices. He thought about the receptionist, who had been fired and felt a pang of regret. She had made a mistake, yes, but she was also a product of a system that had failed to educate and bring awareness. Firing her solved nothing if the underlying issues remained unaddressed. Andre picked up his phone and made a decision. He would call Richard back, not to reconsider the acquisition, but to suggest a better way forward. One that didn't involve scapegoating individuals, but actually addressing the systemic issues at play. As the sun began to set over the city, casting long shadows across his office, Andre felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about one company or one incident anymore. It was about using this moment to push for real change in an industry that had talked about diversity and inclusion for years, without making significant progress. Sometimes, leadership meant making difficult decisions, and sometimes those decisions rippled outward in ways you never anticipated. 6 months had passed since the day Andre Washington walked into Meridian Solutions and was told to wait outside. The tech industry had a notoriously short attention span, always chasing the next big product launch or startup acquisition, but the ripple effects of that day continued to spread in unexpected ways. Andre stood at the podium in a crowded hotel ballroom, looking out at the faces of the Tech Industry Leadership Summit attendees. 300 CEOs, founders, and executives from across the country had gathered to discuss the future of the industry, and Andre had been invited to give the keynote address. "When I started Phoenix Technologies 20 years ago," Andre began, his voice steady and clear, "I didn't set out to become an advocate for diversity and inclusion. I just wanted to build great software." He paused, allowing his words to settle. "But throughout my career, I've learned that who builds the technology is just as important as what gets built. Different perspectives lead to better solutions. Different voices lead to more innovative ideas. From his position on stage, Andre could see Richard Parker sitting in the third row, listening intently. The two men had not spoken face-to-face since that fateful day 6 months ago, though they had exchanged several phone calls in the aftermath. Many of you have heard about what happened between Phoenix Technologies and Meridian Solutions, Andre continued. It became a bigger story than I ever anticipated. But today I'm not here to rehash old news. I'm here to talk about what happens next, not just for those two companies, but for our entire industry. Andre clicked to the next slide in his presentation, showing a graph of diversity statistics across major tech companies. The numbers were sobering. Most companies had less than 5% Black employees in technical roles and even fewer in leadership positions. These numbers tell a story, Andre said, gesturing to the screen. But they don't tell the whole story. Behind these statistics are real people with real talents who face real barriers, and as leaders we have a responsibility to address those barriers. For the next 20 minutes, Andre outlined practical steps companies could take to create more inclusive workplaces, from reviewing hiring practices to establishing mentorship programs to rethinking company culture from the ground up. The audience was attentive, many taking notes. Change doesn't happen overnight, Andre concluded. It happens through consistent, intentional actions over time. It happens when we're willing to make tough decisions even when they come at a cost. And most importantly, it happens when we recognize that diversity isn't just a moral imperative, it's a business advantage. The applause was enthusiastic as Andre stepped away from the podium. As people began to file out for the networking break, Richard Parker approached the stage. That was quite a speech, Richard said, extending his hand. Very inspiring. Andre shook his hand, noting the sincerity in Richard's voice. Thank you. I appreciate you being here today. I wouldn't have missed it, Richard replied. In fact, I was hoping we might have a chance to talk privately. 20 minutes later, the two men sat in a quiet corner of the hotel restaurant, away from the crowds. A server brought coffee and discreetly stepped away. So, Andre said, stirring his coffee, how are things at Meridian? Richard gave a wry smile. Different, challenging, better, I think. He took a sip of his coffee before continuing. The first few weeks after everything were rough. Our stock took a real beating. 3 major clients followed your lead and pulled their contracts. Andre nodded but said nothing, allowing Richard to continue. The board was furious. They wanted someone to blame, and I was the obvious target. There was serious talk about replacing me. Richard's expression was somber. It was a wake-up call, Andre. Not just for the company, but for me personally. What changed? Andre asked. Everything, Richard replied. Instead of just doing surface-level damage control, we took a hard look at our company culture. We hired a diversity consultant who didn't pull any punches. She pointed out issues we hadn't even recognized. Richard pulled out his phone and showed Andre some photos. We completely restructured our hiring process, implemented blind resume reviews, set up partnerships with historically Black colleges and universities, created mentorship programs. He scrolled to another image showing a diverse group of people in Meridian's offices. Our technical team looks very different now. Andre studied the photos with interest. And the receptionist? Lisa, wasn't it? Richard looked surprised that Andre remembered her name. That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. After you and I spoke that day, I realized firing her wasn't the right approach. Instead, we brought her back and made her part of the solution. How so? She became one of our most vocal advocates for change, Richard explained. She spoke openly about her unconscious bias, took part in training sessions, even helped develop our new front desk protocols. He shook his head in amazement. Turns out people can grow when given the chance. Andre nodded, pleasantly surprised by this development. That's good to hear. The truth is, Richard continued, what happened that day was painful for Meridian but necessary. If you had gone through with the acquisition without addressing these issues, they would have just festered beneath the surface. And what about you? Andre asked. You mentioned this was a personal wake-up call. Richard was quiet for a moment. I've had to confront some uncomfortable truths about myself. I always thought of myself as not racist because I didn't actively discriminate against anyone. But I've learned that being not racist isn't enough. I needed to be actively anti-racist, which means recognizing and addressing systemic issues even when they're uncomfortable. Andre appreciated the honesty. That's not an easy realization to come to. No, Richard agreed. But it was an important one. He hesitated before adding, which brings me to the real reason I wanted to talk to you today. I'm listening, Andre said. Meridian is in a much better place now, Richard explained. Our culture has evolved. Our team is more diverse. Even our products have improved because we have more perspectives contributing to their development. He leaned forward slightly. Would Phoenix consider revisiting the acquisition discussion? Andre hadn't expected this question. You want to try again? After everything that happened? Richard nodded. I think both companies are in different places now, and I believe the combined entity would be stronger than either company on its own. Andre considered the proposal. 6 months ago, he had walked away from this acquisition based on principle. The question now was whether enough had changed to reconsider. I'd need to see the evidence of these changes firsthand, Andre said carefully, and my team would need to be convinced as well. Of course, Richard agreed quickly. Full transparency. We have nothing to hide, Andre nodded. I'll discuss it with my executive team. That's all I can promise for now. Richard seemed satisfied with this response. That's all I'm asking for. A chance to show you what Meridian has become. As they finished their coffee and prepared to return to the conference, Richard asked one more question. Looking back, do you regret how things played out? All the public attention, the stock volatility, the scrutiny? Andre thought for a moment before answering. I regret that it had to happen that way, but I don't regret the decision itself. Sometimes it takes a dramatic moment to catalyze real change. A week later, Andre stood in Meridian's lobby again. This time, the experience was notably different. The new receptionist, a young man with a warm smile, recognized him immediately. Mr. Washington, welcome to Meridian Solutions. The team is expecting you in the Horizon conference room. Can I get you anything before I show you up? As Andre followed him to the elevator, he noticed other changes as well. The previously sterile lobby now featured artwork from diverse artists. A large display highlighted the company's community partnerships and social responsibility initiatives. Even the employees moving through the space seemed more varied in terms of age, gender, and ethnicity. In the conference room, Richard had assembled his leadership team, which now included 3 people of color and an even gender split. Among them was Lisa, the former receptionist, now working as part of the human resources team focused on inclusive hiring practices. Thank you all for having me back, Andre said as he took his seat. I'm looking forward to seeing how Meridian has evolved. For the next 3 hours, the Meridian team walked Andre through concrete changes they had implemented, from hiring practices to product development to community engagement. The numbers were impressive. A 200% increase in employees from underrepresented groups, retention rates up across the board, and surprisingly, higher productivity and innovation metrics. As the meeting concluded, Andre stood to address the room. 6 months ago, I walked out of this building convinced that Phoenix and Meridian had incompatible values. Today, I'm seeing evidence that organizations can change when there's genuine commitment from leadership. He turned to Richard. I can't make any promises about the acquisition today. My team will need to review everything we've discussed, but I'm impressed by what I've seen and I'm open to continuing the conversation. The relief in the room was palpable. As people began to gather their things, Lisa approached Andre. Mr. Washington, she said, her voice slightly nervous. I wanted to apologize personally for what happened during your last visit. There's no excuse for how I treated you. Andre nodded. Thank you for saying that. But from what I've seen today, you've turned that mistake into an opportunity for growth, both for yourself and for Meridian. It changed everything for me, she admitted. I never thought of myself as someone with bias before, but that